Hey, it's Kelly from paperbeadrollers.com. Now, a lot of you have asked me for more projects that are not jewelry, that maybe you're not a jewelry person and you just want to do some things with your beads that can be used for other things. So that's what we've got today. We are going to make what's called a stitch marker. Now, if you are a yarnie and you work with crochet or knitting, you know what a stitch marker is, but if not, let me explain. All right, I'm going to show you this in action because if you're not a yarnie, you may not understand. And if you decide to make them to sell, you're going to want to know how they work. So this is something that I'm doing, which is called in the round. Now, you don't have to be doing in the round to use these. You can use them for other reasons too, anytime you want to count stitches and mark it. So I've got 12 stitches here and I'm ready to start a new round. But if I just keep going, I'll lose track of where my rounds stop and start. And if you're doing like a teddy bear body where you need to make this get bigger and smaller in certain spots, that's a problem. So what we do is we just stick this in this loop of the current stitch, and that'll tell me that when I get all the way around there, that my row is done and I can start the next row and do whatever it tells me to do, like add stitches or get stitches away. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and we'll stop back around at the stitch mark. Okay, so here I am, and I'm getting down to the start of my row, and I know that that was the first stitch in this past row because it's got the marker in it. Now I can leave the marker there and just keep going right around it if I want. Sometimes we have reasons to do that, or I can go ahead and stop and move the marker so that it marks my next row. There we go. And I'll just slide that into the current row and I can keep going. So that's stitch markers. These are normally sold in packs of, I don't know, 10 or 20. These are particularly nice. They're much nicer than like the plastic ones that you might get at the big box stores. But we lose them constantly. So they really are a good item to have in your shop. The tools and supplies you'll need for this project are some wire. Now I am using this 12 gauge aluminum wire from Wire Landing, but you can use any wire you happen to have on hand. And you'll need some beads. Now I am using some tiny little beads that I already have in my stash. You just need 2 beads per stitch marker. The tools are very simple. You'll need some type of wire cutter. This is a memory wire cutter. You'll need something to curve your wire with. You can use these rounded pliers or you can even use chain pliers. And I'm using these coated chain nose pliers to straighten things out if I need to. Now let's talk a little more about the beads that you could use to make these stitch markers. They need to be really small. So most of the ones that you see here are made with my Micro Saucers and Rounds digital file that you can get on paperbeadrollers.com. They're very tiny, they're like a millimeter or 2 large. So they're very, very tiny. But I also have some other things in here. I do have a couple larger beads that we could use if we're going to make stitch markers that are meant to be used in bigger projects. Because of course, if you try to use a tiny, thin little stitch marker when you're working with a thicker yarn, like the one I showed you earlier, it's going to fall right out. So you do need different sizes of stitch markers. You could even try a little teeny tiny pillow bead, which is going to be quite a bit bigger, but could work for those larger stitch markers. So get creative. We've also got in here some little tiny baby harlequin. This is a large harlequin. So this is a little teeny tiny baby harlequin bead. So it's got a little different texture on it, just to switch it up a bit. So you can get creative with the type of beads you use, but they just need to be very, very small. So I'm going to cut about 3.5 inches here. It just depends on how big you want your final stitch marker to be. And I'm just going to take my round nose pliers and right at the very end, as close to the end as I can get, I'm going to turn to make a hook. Now I tend to make hooks on one side larger than hooks on the other side because one side will be sort of for your fingers to hold and the other side will be to go through the stitch. So that one's going to be a little bigger on this side. Then you can put in your beads. This time I'm going to use my little harlequin beads, little baby ones. and then do the smaller side over here. Okay, once that's done, you just grab your marker or whatever you're going to use to create the curve, because if I try to bend this without something to brace it on, it's not going to bend right. It's not going to bend where I want it to, and it's not going to be a pretty curve. So I'm just going to use a Sharpie and put pressure equally on both sides. And over it goes. Okay, now once I pull the Sharpie out, I'm gonna pull that in. So you can see one curve is larger than the other. That's okay. They can be even if you want, but that does help me have something to hold my hands on while I put the other side through the stitch itself. Now, if you do need to, let's just make sure these are straight and flat. And there we go. There's our stitch marker. That's it for this project. I hope you have a wonderful week. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more paper beading and crafting tutorials. See you soon.